Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to JPM Studios at Flagship Studios at JPM. My name is Joy Wright, and I'm the head of talent and executive search at Flagship Pioneering. I am thrilled to be joined by Angela Hwang in a conversation about lessons in leadership. So Angela, thank you so much for joining me today. I have to say, I am just, as the head of talent at Flagship, so thrilled that you've decided to join us. It was a long journey of you getting to Flagship, and so we're excited to talk a little bit about that today. I think maybe I'll start. As we've gotten to know each other, I've heard a little bit about your personal story and growing up in South Africa. And so I'd love for you to just talk to us a little bit about the lessons from your early life that prepared you for the career that you've had and also to be a CEO.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Joy, for having me here as well. It is an absolute pleasure of mine to be able to, one, be here with you, and two, to have this opportunity to, to share stories. Yes, my story is a different one in that I don't think anyone expects when you look at me that I would be from a place called South Africa. But that is where I grew up. My mom was a first-generation South African. But as you can imagine, that created very unique dynamics in the way that I was raised and in the life that I had. And to get to the end, it was a wonderful, beautiful life. But it wasn't until I was much older that I realized that there were a lot of things that were not quite right about it and that it was a very different life. And, just to level set, and for those of you who might not know, I was raised during the time of apartheid. And what that means is that if you are not white, then you don't have any human rights in the country. So things like, for example, going to school is not something that you can just expect. Where you live, there were certain areas where you could live and others where you couldn't. There was no public transportation. And so you can imagine these everyday things that we take for granted were not so easy for me, and they seem like basic things, but they really aren't. But when I look back and I think about a life that was theoretically filled with limitations, mine wasn't. And I realized much later on it's that because my parents were so resourceful and so creative, and they turned a world where everything started off as a no, but it actually was a yes. So maybe in the words of what we use today, right? Making impossible things possible. And that honestly is how I grew up. And I'll, just to show you some examples of, what an everyday life was like in South Africa. I remember that when I was, applying to go to college even. Well, first of all, just going to school. As I said, that was not an easy task. So I actually ended up going to a boarding school when I was just 12, 5 hours away from home, because that was the only school that took non-whites, in the catchment of where I lived. And so that was an experience that you think is normal, but actually is highly abnormal, especially for a child that's 12 years old, right? Or when it was time for me to go to college, I was accepted into the University of Cape Town, but actually I couldn't go to college because it required me to live in a dorm, and the dorm was in a white neighborhood. So came the next workaround, which is, well, how do we get authorization? I mean, there's no playbook, right? So you then have to figure out what to do. And it ended up being that I had to get authorization from the Department of Interiors to give me the ability or the authority to live in a white neighborhood so I could go to the dorm so that I could attend university. So pretty much these are examples which I hope I painted for you of sort of like my everyday life and what that looked like, sort of navigating and re-navigating and constantly finding workarounds to live what you would expect to be a life of a normal child. And then I got to a place where I graduated and I went to work, and actually there I experienced a tremendous amount of discrimination, and was maybe a little like relatively less so about me, but very much about my Black colleagues. And I vividly remember an incident where a bunch of us were together, and my white colleagues, very openly and explicitly making fun of my black colleagues, making jokes about them. And I watched this reaction in the room, obviously horrified. And I saw how helpless my black colleagues were in speaking up for themselves, finding a way to express or respond to the comments that were being made. And that was a turning point for me. And actually, I remember that day so vividly because that was the day when I decided that I can't live here anymore. Like, I have to go somewhere else and build a new life. So, and that's what got me here to the US. I chose to come to grad school here and do my MBA, which also was a change in my career from where I was a biochemist and microbiologist, and I moved into a business person, which is what I've been for the last 30 years. So lots of great changes that came from that. But I think stepping back, what you realize is that in a world that was so incredibly unfair and so wrong, there was a path and there was a way for me to actually live a life that didn't feel like I had all these limitations, right? I was highly educated. I had a great job. I was socially well adjusted. I functioned in society. And these are all the things that you would think shouldn't be happening to you, but they do, right? And you thrive and you survive, or you survive and thrive out of it. And so I think when I step back now and look at all of this, what did I learn? I really learned from a very young age and throughout my entire life that you just don't need to take no for an answer, right? That was one. I also learned that there's always a workaround, even for the most seemingly insurmountable hurdles. Like, you have to think hard, you have to be creative, you have to problem solve, but there is a way around it if you want it so bad. And then most importantly, I learned that life just isn't fair, and that there are many who don't have the voice to uplift themselves, and that I have a responsibility to do what I can in whatever capacity I have to help others and to raise their voice and to make them feel important so that we can make this world an equitable place. And so, I definitely did not realize all of this profoundness when I was growing up, because I felt just like this is how you live. But I realize now, looking back, that these three themes of not taking no for an answer, figuring things out and finding workarounds and problem solving, participating and being responsible to help others, that there were themes that played out in my life over and over and over again. And definitely very much so when you're a leader, and that I had a responsibility to use this incredible platform that I had built for myself in my career at Pfizer to do all of those things. But it's not just a professional thing. It's who you are as a friend, as a colleague, as a parent. And these are traits that I carry with me every single day and truly are very formative and do define who I am very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that story with us. And obviously, Angela, you went on to have an amazing, prestigious career at Pfizer, leading, I think, 26,000 colleagues was the size of your organization. And so bringing that leadership and those lessons in early life, phenomenal. You talked a little bit about having no playbook in your early years. And I'd love to talk a little bit about Project Lightspeed, which is the journey that you went on as a leader at Pfizer through the pandemic and bringing the COVID vaccine to market, and how that sort of set you up for this new role you have at Flagship. So I'd love to just hear some of the lessons that you learned and how you brought your early life into that.
Well, that moment we were in, Project Lightspeed, which is AKA the pandemic, was a pivotal point in my career. But honestly, I want to say that even leading up to that, the roles, I had probably a total of 13 roles in the 28 years that I was at Pfizer. But even up to that point, again, looking back, you find yourself in a pattern of seeking roles that sort of have that edginess, right? Where there are difficult things to do, businesses that had no clue where they were going and needed direction and needed a way to build a business model around, needed a way to breathe life into it. And I just had some sort of, attraction to all of those things. And so, great preparation for the pandemic when it really was high stakes and, we needed everyone's attention and everyone's commitment to being able to do amazing things. But essentially, Project Lightspeed was the code name for our vaccine project. And as you know, Pfizer produced not just a COVID vaccine, but also an antiviral against the antiviral treatment against the virus. And I remember so vividly the day also when our CEO said, we've made the decision that we're going to engage in and take part in making this COVID vaccine. And I remember, thinking, my immediate reaction, well, no way, that's impossible. Like, how are we going to do this in 10 months? And that is a normal reaction because you work in a world that's highly regulated. There are guardrails, policies, rules, every which way you turn. And so you're conditioned after a life of 28 years to sort of like, you can be creative around the sandbox, but you're in the sandbox and it's very clear what the sandbox is. And then you have these very, well-established, processes and clinical trials. You know how long they take. It's not guesswork. So the immediate reaction of everyone was, well, that's great that we'd like to do this, but 10 months is impossible. But I think very quickly, myself and all my colleagues, turned to really reflecting on this moment, which is, yes, it does feel like an impossible task, but the consequences of not trying would be so much more dire than if we tried it and failed, because, this was personal for all of us. And I think that it was such a galvanizing moment to realize that we were on this really a mission to save the world. Like, there's like nothing more noble, more, amazing, like it's sort of like next level, in terms of like how important what you do every day is. And so it was definitely a special moment. Though it was a crisis, it galvanized people and it energized all of us. We worked day and night, for 10 months. And the hardest I've ever worked, but I never felt tired because that fuel and that energy of figuring things out every day and putting one foot in front of the other and solving impossible problems is just so immense that it fuels you and it gives you this incredible, motivation and positive energy. But yes, like as you said, we had no playbook. Like we don't know what this is. We've never used mRNA. There's many things we know, but mRNA was not something that we knew. And so very quickly, we turned to, we know there's a lot of things we don't know. We have no tools, no processes, no way of knowing what to do here. But what do we know? Well, there was a few things we do know, right? You control what you know or what you have. And what we had, first and foremost, was a very clear mission, crystal clear. One COVID vaccine in 10 months. So we knew what it is that we had to accomplish. Secondly, what we did know and also had was collective brain power. We at Pfizer had never touched mRNA, but our partner, BioNTech, had. They had been in the mRNA business for a decade or more, 20 years probably, and they had incredible depth of experience, but they didn't have vaccine experience and anti-infective or infectious disease experience, which is what we had. So between us, BioNTech with mRNA technology and their expertise, Pfizer's expertise in vaccine research and development, our deep, deep knowledge in manufacturing, scaling up, taking clinical product into commercial product, and then my knowledge of how to commercialize products of all kinds across the entire world with a global commercial footprint. These were things that really come out of a true partnership, and that's how we worked every single day. We don't talk about this much, but at the moment when we started working with BioNTech, we actually didn't even have a contract in place, but we just didn't have time to deal with the contract. And so we put our trust in one another and we all just worked with this mission in mind. And it's incredible what you can do when you are focused on the right things, I guess, in this case, the making of the vaccine. But Joy, there was so many more things, that were lessons learned in this sort of mission to do impossible things. And I think we also relied on this incredible teamwork that was between all of us. Okay, so great, we have this knowledge, we shared it, but we're in big pharma. We have silos, we had levels, we have many managers, 7, 8, 9 levels of people that you have to go to get, to communicate. And I think we went through like a really special moment where we realized that we just absolutely have to challenge every convention that we've ever believed in and just work differently. So we set ourselves some guardrails for what cannot be changed. Patient, integrity of our clinical trial data, patient safety, adherence to regulatory procedures. There was like a box that we created, a new box that we had painted for ourselves. And then we said anything that doesn't belong in that box, everything gets redesigned, everything. So that sort of empowered everyone, obviously, with a very clear mission, with what the do's and don'ts are. And then it enabled people to reimagine and to reinvent how you would go about doing something. And that was that case for all of us. But we also, in that same journey, had to break down a lot of other barriers because typically, we're a big pharma company. So if typically when we sort of share information, you can imagine we're in a big boardroom, lots of formal business reviews, and then, you have the whole hierarchy, the executive VP, the senior VP. So if you really wanted to speak to, say, a manager in the company, you'd have all the bosses stacked up. And we're like, we don't have time for this. Okay, who knows what? And doesn't matter who your title is, where you sit, no silos. I mean, we broke down everything. All these things that govern bureaucracy and how people think about how they should work, we just broke all of that down. And we went for the truth. This is the problem we're trying to solve today. Who knows? And please join us. So we met sometimes 3 times a day, 2 times a day, definitely every day. We looked at the data, how they were emerging. We made decisions. We pivoted. We looked at things that we didn't understand. We queried. We questioned. And that's how we did our work every single day for 10 months. And it was this incredible, I think, spirit of collaboration, the spirit of teamwork, that, we're on a team, but we can't have FOMO about what you're doing because I got to do what I have to do. You have to do what you have to do. There's a lot going on. So we all have to believe in the fact that we're going to step up as team players and deliver what we need to deliver. That's relative to our roles and responsibilities. And when you're in that moment, you have to step up because you can't let your team member down because you may be the person dragging this program down. Yeah. So I think there were tremendous lessons, not just for leadership, but for how teams operate, how you break down hierarchies, how you can communicate, and how you innovate. Even in a time of crisis. And you might argue, a crisis actually fuels you because, you have no option but to do it. But it does make you think, like, why should we need a crisis to make us work this way? Like, we should be doing these things all the time. And so I think there are a lot of applicable lessons to my role now, as well as to, many of the companies that we have here at Flagship, because we're all working. I mean, Flagship by definition is a company and a group of companies that only work on bleeding edge science, things that have never happened before, unprecedented pathways, or, and so it sounds impossible, right? Because it's never been done before. There's also a sense of urgency. In the same way we had the pandemic by which we have to do our work because our markets are fiercely competitive. Yeah. There are, even though our companies are small, there we have to communicate well. We have to understand each other's roles and responsibilities. So I think that all these lessons about clarity of role, how we communicate, breaking down silos, working well as teams, not letting each other down, and then most importantly of all, never missing a deadline. We never missed a deadline. If we didn't understand something and we knew that deadline was 3 days away, like whatever solutions we had, delivered against that solution with that timeline. Like we just worked on these incredible timelines. And so, you look back on this, and from the day that we said we were going to do this to the day that we submitted our file to the FDA, it was just a mere 248 days. And within 24 hours, within an hour, actually, of the FDA approving our vaccines were already on the way out of our manufacturing plants, going to wherever they needed to go. And so this human effort is just, it's indescribable. It's describable because it actually happened and I can describe it. But, it was so enormous and so immense that, it just really is like an unforgettable time, in my life. And lessons learned that are absolutely applicable in every situation.
And what's so fascinating to me is, as I hear you talk about this, to me, it's the future backwards approach that we take at Flagship. It's pioneering, right? You were pioneering in that environment. And so now you find yourself in a situation where you're CEO-Partner at Flagship of Metaphore, and you are now leading a pioneering team. I'd love to just take a few minutes to talk a little bit about your journey to Flagship. So as the head of talent, obviously very intimately involved in attracting you to Flagship. And it was a journey. So I'd love to just have you share a little bit about that journey for you and how you ultimately made the decision that this was the right move for you in your career.
Yeah, you're right, Joy. It was a journey. It was a year-long journey. But it was a great year. And I learned a lot about, not just myself, but the ecosystem and the company in that year. And I really have to thank you, Lovisa, Nubar, for being patient and believing in me and giving me the space to make this decision. But I think about why it took me so long. And I think it was because I didn't fully appreciate what the Flagship ecosystem offered. And I didn't also fully appreciate what the Metaphor platform could do. And though I had come to Cambridge a great number of times to meet with many people, and all of you were so generous with introducing me to so many people at Flagship, it just all feels intangible, until it becomes tangible. Like, what is it that we are trying to do here? And it sort of like the tables turned for me when one day Lovisa calls me and she goes, Angela, we want you to come to Cambridge and we want you to make a presentation. If you are the CEO of Metaphor, what would you do? What are our value creation options and opportunities? Then it became tangible for me. I'm like, we have a problem or a question that we need to answer. And so it created the impetus for me to take all the conversations that I've been having, but sort of like in hypothetical terms or just building knowledge or getting to know people, into the reality of, if I own this, what is this going to look like? How am I going to relate to Flagship? And how's Flagship going to help me to build this company? And then importantly, do I understand and believe in this technology enough that I can go and champion it through these impossible journeys, right? And so it was definitely 100% the turning point for me. So I dug in. And the teams were just so gracious and generous with their time, spending time, the scientists spent time with me, explaining the technology to me. Lovisa was fantastic in giving me access to experts, in the science, and even giving me access to Novo Nordisk, our partner, to help me understand, like, why is Metaphor so special? Why did Novo? When you speak to Novo and you ask them directly, well, why did you pick this? You can access anything in the world. Why this? And it just changes the conversation and the light bulbs that sort of go off in your head in terms of what this is. And so, as I was studying, you could say, and sort of getting up to speed on the technology, I remember there were moments where I'm like, God, this is really difficult. But then there was this moment when things started to materialize for me. And I remember as I was writing the presentation, the more I wrote, the more the ideas flowed, and things just started solidifying, meaning I could see a path for what I could do with this technology and where I could take this company. And so that was the tangible moment that I had been missing this whole time. And it was that request to come and discuss my views on what I would do with Metaphor that completely changed how I engaged with Metaphor, how I engaged with Flagship, and made it into a real moment for me. So as you can imagine, yes, that was the turning point.
Amazing. And obviously we're thrilled that that's the decision that you made. And coming in to be CEO of Metaphor, you're also a CEO-Partner at Flagship Pioneering, right? Which means you're part of this group of CEOs and having an impact, and also sharing, right? Knowledge sharing. And so let's talk a little bit about, outside of building Metaphor, what are some of the other things you're excited about participating in at Flagship and the impact that you hope to have at the firm?
Well, one of the reasons why I chose Flagship, or chose Metaphor, I should say, was because of the Flagship ecosystem, meaning those two things for me are just sort of, in one. Yeah. But you don't see that often in other venture firms or in other, other, I would say, startups or other, younger biotech companies. And for me, the Flagship ecosystem represents this incredible opportunity where you have, the brain trust of some of just the most incredible leaders in science and in healthcare, in one place. So just for me, that was a major attraction, which is how can I, for the benefit of Metaphor, draw from, these incredible leaders? How can I as an individual learn from them? And then how can we together, whether it's Flagship helping me with Metaphor or me helping Flagship grow, both companies? And so, clearly, with my background in the commercial space, that's something that I can bring to the Flagship ecosystem. They're early platform companies. So you don't typically think about the end game, for a little while. But what I have found, and one of the reasons why I chose to go into an early company, is because I actually believe that understanding the end game and where you want to go, AKA the mission, from the beginning is crucial to driving the company to a positive end goal, and having all the scenarios and all the possibilities planned out in terms of how you're going to get to that destination. That certainly was not just my COVID experience, but pretty much many, many experiences at Pfizer. So I think that was, what I want to be able to offer is just all the experiences I bring, be it my commercial expertise, or be it the experiences that I have gained through building and transforming many businesses at Pfizer. Importantly, one of the things that Big Pharma does a lot of and does well, I should say as an expertise, is scaling, right? When you go from 10 to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000, how do you do that? And that was very much, our every day. So I think there's that. I also think that because I've had the benefit of having those 13 jobs that exposed me to every aspect of the entire value chain of a pharma company, all the way from research to the end game of being in a country, but everything else that goes on, sort of the operational elements that are required and the executional excellence you need to pull off a business. You can have a great strategy, but unless you can line up all the pieces to execute, you can't pull off the strategy. And so I think I'm just very much in tune with the execution as much as I am with the strategy. And then finally, as we began actually this conversation and talking about my love for making this world an equitable place and advocating, for others, I've always played a very big role at Pfizer in uplifting, underrepresented communities, whether that's women, whether that's, other communities of color. It's always been a big part of my life. So I hope that that's something that I can do too here, to help attract more women talent into Flagship, into our companies, to join the ranks of like incredible leaders. We talked about Lovisa a lot, and I have to give her public thanks for just the incredible leadership that she displayed to me and being a great role model, which is what attracted me to come here. But also since I've been here, the incredible women that I've met here who are all just as good as anybody that I've ever met in any part of the industry where I've had experiences. And so knowing that you're in a place where you're in like company and people that also want to advocate for women leadership and other important, I think, agenda items, like that's a place where you want to be part of that, and you want to help this company to grow.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I think with time, taking on board roles so that I can also bring my skills to other specific companies beyond Flagship. Beyond Metaphor would be, something that would be wonderful, and where I hope to bring value.
Yeah, and we'll have huge impact, I'm sure. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the fact that we're wearing pink today. The Biotech CEO Sisterhood, of which I know you're likely now a part of, they encouraged us to wear pink to support women executives and lifting them to the C-suite. And so we're so excited that so many of our colleagues at Flagship participated in this today. We are proudly wearing pink. And we look forward to you being a champion with our team of attracting more women, more diverse talent to Flagship Pioneering.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's anything I've learned through all the initiatives that I started at Pfizer, and even looking through the years, the incredible progress that we made on women and hiring women and retaining women, at Pfizer, it is truly a job that has to be intentional, and that you have to be consistent about, and you have to have sustained efforts around. It's already so hard if you look at the statistics of how many women are actually, in C-suite and in board roles. There's still a ton of room for improvement. And what I realized for all of the time that I was at Pfizer, it's that you have to have a plan. You have to stay on the plan, you have to measure it, you have to work towards it, and you have to make sure that someone is championing it, because it is that easy if you don't, for it to not happen, right? And for us to revert. And so this is something, as you can tell, I'm passionate about. And it's just something that I hope I can continue to champion with other amazing women leaders here at Flagship.
Yeah, I think we're incredibly lucky to have amazing female leaders, but also allies that are just
Absolutely.
unapologetic about bringing women into leadership roles at Flagship. And it's something that we are completely focused on. And we're just so happy you're here to join us on that. Thank you. Thank you for having this conversation and for sharing so much of your story with us.
Thank you, Joy.
And enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
You're welcome.